So what I'm just going to give you is I'm just going to brief you a brief introduction about me as your speaker tonight. So my name is Arran Smith, and for me, I'm going to be talking about what is dyslexia and talk a little bit about my dyslexia because I am severely dyslexic myself. And then I'm also going to talk about assistive technology, how I use it, and what assistive technology is, and what when we say the word assistive technology, what do we mean? So I'm just going to check one thing. That's fine. That's good. That's brilliant. Thank you. Right. Okay. So as I said, my name's Arran Smith. I am dyslexic. I am quite severely dyslexic. I class myself as one of the 4% of the population. So around in the UK, there is an estimated 10% of the population that have some severity of dyslexia, and a further 4% that are severely dyslexic. And these are people that have probably severe difficulties when it comes to dyslexia. Now, I've worked in the field of dyslexia for over 15 years. And I love technology. I'm a massive fan of technology. I'm just looking at my desk now, so I'm using my Surface Book. I've got my iPhone, got a Lynx tablet, I've got an iPad, I've got a Surface Go. There's a Pixel phone over there. There's a VoIP phone on the desk. There's a fish tank that's got does funny things. Anything related to technology, I love. I've always been a fan of technology, and this kind of started when I was when I was in year 6 at school, when I first got to see a computer and got to see that Encarta CD. If you remember that, I saw it on a CD and saw what it could do. Now, my dyslexia, I'm dyslexic now, and I was dyslexic when I was younger. I got diagnosed when I was age 6, and my analogy to my dyslexia at that time was like, when I actually got told, it was brilliant. I was like, yeah, amazing. I'm really happy about it. What a label. It's brilliant. And then I understood what dyslexia was, and it was bad times. And it was like, I use the analogy of going to the dentist. Going to the dentist and that feeling of stress, anxiety, and that's probably how dyslexia felt me for a long time. I did get a statement. I know we now call that an EHCP, but I did get a statement of education. And kind of my life in school was interesting. When I was in year 6 at school, and that's when I had the whole class told off for picking on me. I was bullied because I didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it wrong. I did remember, though, never understanding silent reading as well, thinking that silent reading was just basically that me looking at the wall or counting the ceiling tiles. But when I got to my high school, I kind of learnt a little bit more about my dyslexia. I had a little bit of support. I did have a teacher or a TA say to my parents that I'd never achieved anything because I couldn't read. When I moved to my upper school, though, when I did my GCSEs, I did leave school with 5 GCSEs. That the Senko school said, you're going to support you, and she gave me a teaching assistant in every class, which kind of defeated the object a little bit. And now when I look at it, I think that if we were using technology in schools, it'd be brilliant. But for me, my dyslexia is there every day. It affects me every day. It does. I saw a brilliant thing the other week from the British Dyslexia Association saying that dyslexics have positive procrastination. And I thought that was an amazing terminology. And for me, I think that actually having that procrastination time just to relax and think about stuff is really kind of like it's there, or having that creative brain, and that, but then also having this difficulty of having to deal with a world full of words and letters. And I think that's the thing is that I am severely dyslexic. I have no automatic reading capability. I don't read automatically. I have to tell myself to read. But actually, for me, technology is the biggest help in my day. I can have Alexa tell me what is in my diary. I can put my details in the diary. My diary flashes up, and it was buzzing, saying to me that why am I not on the webinar, and that kind of concept. But dyslexia has affected me, and of course, things have to help and how things change my life. And I think that you have a path there that I thought was really quite useful, and we do have a path in life. And I think for me it started with my mum and dad, who supported me, who took me to the Leicestershire Dyslexia Association. where I had lessons. I learned to be confident, and I learned to grow a little bit more as a dyslexic. I got my BDA Young Achievers Award for the support I did in Leicester, which really gave me confidence. And I actually worked for the British Dyslexia for over 5.5 years. I've been a trustee of the BDA. I've been a volunteer, and now I'm doing lots of presentations for them within my various roles. But in life, I've succeeded even more. And this is a picture actually I took. This is in North Wales, and you can't really see that. I'm actually going to abseil off that in a second after I took this picture. Amazing picture from last week when I was in North Wales. And I have worked in the field of dyslexia for over 15 years, so I have achieved something. I have been able to support them people. I founded 2 companies. I consult with large international companies. I was able to speak in India in 2017 as an international speaker, and I'm able to support an independent school specialising in dyslexia, and that's a real benefit and a real succession for me, I think. And I not to be big-headed or anything, but actually that even though every day I have difficulties reading, writing, spelling, time management, organising my thoughts, organising myself, I have to keep thinking that no, I'm always doing it for the greater good is probably the best way to talk about it, and supporting that. Now, I use this picture a lot whenever I talk about dyslexia, and I think that this picture sums up dyslexia really well for me. For me, it kind of shows that a child or a young person with dyslexia. So if you're in the workplace, we have to just relate it a little bit. So for me, is that concept it is. So this here is a child that has, or a young person that is there in a room that's a library that may not like it. It looks like she's gripping that pen really tight and really closed up. And that to me, I think is an amazing kind of concept when we think about it. And when we think about dyslexia, we have to think about it that dyslexia is not just about reading. It is often about spelling and can be more about writing, time management. And for me, time management is something that I don't really understand time. So when I look at a clock face, if you think of a round clock face and think of from half past to 2:15, so from the 6 to the 9, I can never work out them time zones. I know what half past is and what 2:15 is, but is it 22, 20 past, 25 minutes past, 35 minutes past? It's very confusing. I've never been able to do that. But also when it comes to time management, I think the morning is faster than the afternoon. And I think that when we look at time, we have to overcompensate, and a lot of dyslexics do. I know I do particularly, and for me, I have found it in the past quite difficult. I have really overcompensated. I try and be early as much as possible. I do not like being late. I think that working memory process is really where it comes to, and actually that working memory to then actually move that the short-term memory moving into into working memory. I can remember a conversation, I can remember a situation from about 15 years ago. I probably can't remember the conversation I just had with my daughter when she came in from school. And that is that short-term memory concept. And that is the thing, is that actually that difficulty of understanding letters, sounds and numbers is where it comes into it. And then also comes back to that organisational skill. Now, of course, dyslexia is a co-occurring difference or a neurodiverse difference. So we have that overlapping concept of dyslexia with dyspraxia, with dyscalculia, with dysgraphia, with ADHD, autism, and you could go into things like Asperger's or ASD, and even Tourette's. Could all go into that neurotypical, neurodiverse concept. And I think for me, that because I am dyslexic and dyspraxic and have tendencies of both ASD and ADHD, I think that's where organisation is a real difficulty. I think organisation more does sit with dyspraxia, and I think that that's where we need to look at things and have to think about things. And when I start talking about technology, you'll understand why I'm telling you this. But of course, it's all about that lack of visual blueprints. That we have to think about that concept. And when I mean that concept, for you guys that are listening to the webinar or listening to it on the recording, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I want you to listen very carefully. If I say the word cat, what do you see in your head? I'm going to say that again. If I say the word cat, what do you see in your head? Now that is an interesting conversation. Now I would say probably 50 to 60% of you will see a picture of a cat in your head. But actually some of you may have listened to what I said very carefully and saw the word cat, because I actually did say, if I say the word cat, what do you see in your head? And that is that concept of that visual blueprint. It's a really good visualization of it, that actually when you think of a word to spell it, you actually see it. And that's not something that many dyslexics can do. Not all dyslexia is different, of course. And we have got that visual confusion. And we do have that visual confusion with words and that inconsistency of words. So if you think of the word was, saw, and Sam, these are all 3-letter words with very similar letters in. And even if you have an upside down W that could be an M, it's a really confusing concept. The sound confusions that people face with f, the, v, f, the, v. And that may not come out very well over the microphone, but I'm saying the F sound, the sound, the V sound can be really hard to see and listen to, because that comes down to that weak phonological awareness, that phonological skill. I have a 4-year-old daughter who can spell everything phonetically, which is really difficult for me because I was brought up on letter names rather than letter sounds. And so for me that is quite difficult. But it is really interesting as well, because seeing how dyslexia is a difference. It is genetics. It is going to be in the genes of my daughter. My daughter's only 4, and I'm fascinated to watch her development. I was away a week last week, and I've come back, and her vocabulary has grown in a week. Now, it may be that she's been back at school a week, so she's talking more, and her vocabulary is there, and it's more consistent. She doesn't like reading like I did. I did not like reading. I still don't like reading personally, but I think that's the thing, is that we have to learn, and we look at that, and with the interventions we can think about, we can move it forward. And for me, that we have to look at technology in both different ways, but also when we look at dyslexia, we have to think about them positive strengths. We have to make sure that we understand our dyslexics that we're working with, either as students, as employers or employees, and we have to think that actually we have to look at these strengths. And one of these big things are like that visual and lateral thinking skill, which I think is an amazing concept, with that problem solving skill. With that lateral thinking, I'm very good at seeing and picturing what things will look like. And once I see something, I can understand the space. I can't see measurements, length, but when I see it, then I can. Problem solving is one of them. Is amazing concept. Like GCHQ has a high number of dyslexics just because they like their problem solving skills. I always look at things in that bigger picture concept, and I like problem solving. When I worked at the BDA, the previous CEO to the BDA said to me that if there was an issue in the office, the first person you should go to is me, because she knew that I could solve that problem. And I will never forget when she said that. That big picture thinking, that global thinker, being able to see and think outside the box a little bit, being able to spread the awareness and be an out-the-box thinker, I think is a really positive way of looking at things. I had a meeting yesterday with an organisation, and I looked at what they were doing and gave them 5 ideas of how they could move it forward, and actually show what they've got, but actually separate it a little bit. Visual and spatial awareness depend on co-occurring difficulties, of course. Hopefully by now you can realise that I have good verbal communication skills. There's an organisation called Groups Dyslexia Aware Counselling that support counsellors in the awareness of dyslexia, and they say DVD, dyslexia verbal diarrhea, we don't shut up sometimes. And I think that if you understand your difficulties and understand your differences, you do have a high level of motivation and perseverance. And that can be quite positive. And I think that's the thing we have to look at. We have to look at both the negatives and the positives. Or rather than call them negatives, let's call them differences or difficulties. So let's talk a little bit about technology and the concept of assistive technology. Now, for me, I want to see good tech. I want to see good technology to do certain things. I want to see that it grows a person. It empowers a person. It enables someone to succeed. It encourages that person and may reduce some stress, some anxiety, and has that empathy, that empathetic kind of concept. And for me, assistive technology is definitely around that. I think that when we look at assistive technology and what assistive technology is, technology should assist. It is an assistive tool. It's an adaptive tool and maybe a rehabilitation tool. And when I just searched for this, they were the three words that popped out at me. And I think that when we look at adaptive, I think adaptive is definitely there. And maybe that word adaptive is probably more for physical disabilities, and the same with rehabilitation. But actually, adaptive technology is there. And I think that actually could be, we can actually think about that when we look at dyslexia and other disabilities, of course. And I think that it should also aid and support and assist. Again, change is a big thing that I thought of when I was thinking about what is assistive technology. It should help change your life. It should help enable you to do stuff. And there's a word I haven't used, is enable, which I think is another really good word. Empowerment is so important, I think to give people confidence, self-esteem and growth can really enable it. And I think that when we look at assistive technology, it should do all these things, and technology that's out there does do all these things. And I think for you guys that are out there, when you're working out what is assistive tech, what should we use, how should we use it, these are the things we need to be looking at. Is it going to change the person's life in some way? Is it going to enable them? Is it going to adapt them? Is it going to assist them? Is it going to support them? Is it going to change them? Is it going to empower them? And I think that in the industry of assistive technology, it's an amazing industry, and I think that actually one of the biggest things about it is that they are all productivity tools. Majority of the tools that we'll talk about, and when I show you a list in a second, you'll see that they are all aids for differences or difficulties or differences. They are designed to actually support with that difficulty or that difference. And that is important, it is, to think about. So I think that when we look at that technology, we should allow technology to allow us to achieve, to grow, to be supportive. And I think the big thing is about being independent. It should also have improved that self-esteem and self-confidence. And for me, that independence conversation is there. If we are in the workplace, we should be able to independently work. If we are in school, we should be able to independently work. Be an independent learner, be an independent grower, and so forth. And that independent learning kind of like circle, that independent learning concept is confidence, achievement, self-esteem and ability. And that's a really useful kind of 4 things that we should think about of technology. So when I showed you, I'm going to show you this picture here, and it's quite strange that I've done this. So school, work, home, and I've put D. Just put D just because actually I should have wrote the word difficulty and difference. Should be 2 Ds there. So let's think about difficulties and differences. Let's think about what do we have in, say, let's start with the workplace. So in the workplace, what is when we look at our dyslexic concept, we've talked about at the beginning of the webinar what dyslexia is. So let's think about in the workplace how dyslexia is going to affect someone. So it's going to affect someone's time management. It may affect their reading capability. It may affect their spelling. It may affect their writing. It may affect their knowledge of getting information out of their head onto paper, the way of articulating what they need to say. In school, very similar. We have to do a lot of reading. So again, reading, spelling, writing, maybe a bit of time management to get to lessons, the same with work. And then home life. How are we going to work within home life? How can technology help us in home? And I think there's a wide range of technology out there. And over the next few weeks, so over the next 2 months of looking at these 4 webinars, I'm going to talk about different pieces of technology that are out there, looking at technology that I use personally that I feel are useful, talk about other pieces of technology that are out there that do similar things and the differences between them. And I think for me, it's definitely thinking about what we can do. So out there is different types of technology. And these are not technology names. These are not technology types. These are technology types is the best way to describe them. So we have text-to-speech. So text-to-speech is exactly what it says in it does. It turns text into speech. It allows us to listen to text into speech. And this can be done through software or hardware. Speech to text. Exactly what I'm doing now. I'm talking into a microphone and it is not coming out as text, it is coming out as speech. But if we were speaking in, it would then convert that to text. And that technology for me is what I'm really interested in, because actually it's growing so much, and actually it's growing even more than we actually thought it ever would. And I think that kind of technology is there. Text-to-speech has been around for a long time. For the reason being is we have multiple disabilities that use it. It's not just dyslexia; it's people that are partially sighted or blind have been using text-to-speech for a long time. Speech-to-text kind of started out as a pure productivity tool, and maybe a tool for someone with RSI. It's removing that need to type. But actually now, when we look at the world of home life, looking at things like Alexa, Google Home, looking at Siri, Cortana, looking at even people's cars, and even when we go and speak to when we ring up the bank and say our details of the phone. This is all speech to text. This is all speech to text technology, and I think now that what it is, it's becoming more of a globalized thing rather than just an assistive thing. We will be looking at mind mapping, and mind mapping, the concept of there. The concept of mind mapping and study skills has been around a long time, and it's been helping, and it's been proven in lots of ways to help dyslexics to organise their thoughts and organise their structure. I often do mind maps before presentations. Depending on how I feel. With this one, I just went straight in and did it and laid it out how I wanted to lay it out. And in my head, but sometimes I would do a full mind map so we can actually see it. Maybe we're going to look at note-taking, and over the webinars we will mention note-taking. Note-taking is definitely out there as an assistive tool. There's products out there that help with note-taking. But how we do note-taking is definitely one of the concepts we need to look at, and different ways of supporting note-taking. Spelling. Spelling is one of the things that is quite difficult to support with. We have some advances in spell checks built into products, but then also we have to think about products that are out there to help spelling. So autocorrection, in-depth spell checking for serious mistakes, which are there and are available. I've put there educational for the one reason. When we look at the 5 above the word educational, so spelling, note-taking, mind mapping, text, speech to text, and text to speech, the educational concept is not really going to be covered over the full webinars. The products like Nessie, Touch Type Read and Spell, WordShark, I know it was in my head somewhere, WordShark, and a few others, Lexicon. These are products that are out there that are designed more to deal with that education concept. So when we look at how we teach dyslexics, we teach dyslexia in a structured multisensory way. Majority of this is done on pen to paper or 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or in groups to really emphasize it. There's not many products out there that actually help with that. There's a few more coming into the marketplace. There's one that I just saw recently, which is on the Microsoft Store, which is an app you can buy for about £9 for a Windows device, which I thought was quite interesting. And there is a few products on the iPad and the iPhone, on iOS and on Android that you can use as well to help with education. But I think that actually that teaching to read or teaching to spell is quite hard, and it takes a lot of development. But actually helping with that difficulty is a really useful tool. So I want to talk about just a little about software. Now, over the next few weeks, we're going to talk mainly about software and probably about hardware. But I will touch on the two concepts, and that is installed software and built-in. Now, up until about a year ago, probably just a bit less than that, I would purely be talking about installed software. I'm talking about products that you have to go and purchase, and they would be you would pay for them and you'd install them, and then they would work, which has been quite interesting. But as well, I will touch on that inbuilt technology, because I think that actually that you need to know that's a starting point. I think for me, as a severe dyslexic, if I had the inbuilt technology that's now available, actually I would have achieved a lot sooner, because I would have still used the third-party products, which I use every day, but I also will be doing it. But then we just need to touch a little bit on hardware. Now, for me, hardware could be many things. So, hardware for me is not just about say a C pen or a microphone, but actually, but it is though, and that's the thing is that we have to look at this hardware concept. And I think that I'm just bringing up Dyslexia Box's website, just looking at things like this, and these are things that I probably won't be covering so much, but the things here like the LiveScribe pen, which is all hardware based. We're looking at also things like the reading pens, which are hardware. You've got here, sorry, let me just go back to this, headphones and microphones. Again, useful tools that are not just, they are necessary parts of equipment that we need to look at and think about. What else was there? Sorry, I'm just doing three things. That's quite useful thing there. That's for people that have difficulties with hearing and so forth. So again, hardware is very important, and I think that actually that when we look at assistive technology, we have to make sure we get the right concept. So again, when we think about like the 2Ds or the 3Ds I've got there, so in school, home and work, I think that we must think about that actually that the difficulties and differences around them and how we look at it. So having that concept of we knowing that actually text to speech is there to support with reading, and speech to text is to work there with spelling and writing. How can we work them together? And that's a real think about it. But I think there is something that's really important for me, and I've put it there 3 times because it is really important. And this is where I become a small hypocrite in myself, because I think that actually that everyone needs to have training. Now, I am a dyslexic that does not like training as such, but actually now realizes that actually I should have training. And training could be in many different forms. It doesn't have to be one-to-one. It is better one-to-one, of course. It works really well one-to-one, and training is very useful, and it's a useful tool that are there. But actually, when we think about this environment, we have to think outside the box as much as possible. So whenever I say, what do you want to get for that dyslexic, or what do we want to get for that person that needs assistive technology, I think these 4 steps are really useful. The understanding, and that's yours and theirs. So you, as maybe the teacher or the employer, you understand their difficulties, but they understand their difficulties or their differences, but you also understand their strengths. You understand that what you know about them, and they understand about it. So you understand that actually that when you say, okay, that you're dyslexic, they may have an amazing reading speed. So I've worked with children that can read perfectly fine, just really can't get it down on paper. They just can't articulate quick enough to write it down. They can't spell very well, but they can read. So is it beneficial for them to have text-to-speech if they don't need it? Is it more beneficial to put speech to text in? That's the question. You have to understand people. The environment that you work in. So is this a school classroom? Is this a one-to-one lesson? Is this the workplace? Is the workplace an open plan office? Really understanding the environment that you're in really can help what technology you need. Do you need noise cancelling headphones? Do you need a really good directional microphone? Can you get away with just using the microphone in the device? What works well? These are things we need to think about. Do we want to get the right device, making sure the environment's there? Knowledge. Don't always rely on your own knowledge. And something that I have to think about all the while is I should never rely just on my own knowledge. I have to listen to what people say. And I think for me, it's really interesting for you to get knowledge. So like you're all doing now, you're doing a little bit of CPD on awareness of technology and awareness of this concept of just giving you that basic information about what is technology, what is dyslexia, how we can bring them together and understand that knowledge. And that's knowledge of yours and theirs, because the knowledge of what's out there, what is there for them. And of course, training. If you are an employee or an employer, join that training session. Understand how to use that piece of software. Understand how to use that piece of hardware. The same with teachers. If you're going to be in that classroom situation and that student's going to be using that piece of hardware, do that training with them so they understand it and then you understand it. Because actually, most people will learn in different ways. And I think that you need to understand that actually that you both need to have that knowledge. And it keeps going round and round. I think that resource concept comes into it, but I think they're the things we need to think about. It comes very much that important. The three triangle there of training, training, and training is a really important concept. And I think that if we look at this, I'm just going to go back to this slide here and go back to this thinking about the homeschool and work life. I think we have this work lifestyle. We have this lifestyle with across our lives. We go to school, we go to work, we are at home, and home is kind of that catalyst in the middle. And I think that we have to think about how we can use things in technology to help us. And it may be that we use things like the Alexas, the Google Homes to help us assist that work. And we may use that alarms to help us on our phones. We may use our phones. And I think that's a really positive thing to think about, actually, that actually your phone in your pocket is one of the best assistive tools you're ever going to have. But it's then what you actually need for it and understanding it. And that's a really useful thing. Training, training, training. I will come back to that training thing every time I talk about this concept. So I think for us today, we've kind of gone over this concept around technology, around what is dyslexia, a very basic understanding of what dyslexia is, how dyslexia can affect people, how it affects me as a severe dyslexic, and how it affects some of my friends and differences. And I think for me that it's really important to understand what dyslexia is. And I think for you guys that are listening, you can get support both from the SCND group and Dyslexia Box. We will send you out an email to talk to you about that, of how you can do that. So getting support from us is very useful, either through the SCND CPD webinars that we run, and we will send you information about the more webinars that we run, that Dyslexia Box and myself are going to run over the next few weeks, over the next few months. But also don't forget that Dyslexia Box does do that free consultation. We have that 10-minute free consultation, 10-15-minute consultation that you can have with our assistive technology guru and have that conversation. And I think the big thing about it is that it works for me. Technology works for me. And I think that it can work for other people. I think that's the big thing. I'm going to now finish the conversation, finish up the webinar theoretically. I'm 3 minutes under where I wanted to be, but that's not a problem. So we have now the time open for questions. I'm not going to read out anyone's name. I'm just going to read out the questions, and I'm going to leave the recording going so people can listen to the questions, because they might be a question they wanted to ask. So at the bottom of your screen on your little control panel, the floor is open to you. There is a question. It is. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring Ben in here. So Ben's on the line as well. Just let me do this. Give us a second. Hopefully Ben will come in a sec. Hi Ben, can you hear me? You can speak, Ben, now. Everyone can hear you. Okay, he's not there, he isn't, so that's fine. Okay, it's not working for him. I thought I could hear him. Okay, so please put your questions in the question box. We'd love to have some questions from you. Okay, so I can see it is there, that's fine. It is there, Ben's there. Okay, so I've got my first question here. So I would like information as a parent of a dyslexic 10 child who needs additional support at school, particularly mind mapping. My son is good at reading, but struggles with poor ideas in paper. So basically the best thing to say to you is that we are covering that in our last webinar in more detail, but I think actually that mind mapping is a really useful tool. I think basically the best thing you want to start with is actually looking at how you can do it either in picture form, or how I would say is start just by getting that knowledge down. So start with that concept of talking about me. So if I was going to write a mind map about me, I'd put me in the middle, draw a circle around it, and put a line off, and maybe put Lucy, and then put wife, and then put Amelia and daughter, and that basically helps that person. It will help your child there get used to that concept of technology, the concept of mind mapping. And then what would happen is basically that in the webinar that we do, we'll talk about specific programs that are out there for mind mapping and how we would use it. So hopefully that answers a little more of the question. It probably doesn't answer the question fully, just because I don't want to go into too much detail now when we have a full webinar where it gives me a lot more choice to actually express how you can do that. So next question here, it says, hi there, I'm doing a PhD and I have just been diagnosed. I find reading a struggle very difficult. I am also hearing impaired. What assistive technology is there out there? Okay. So the person has also said that they're dyspraxic. So technology again for that concept is that we're looking at is that, so you said there, I'm hoping you said hearing impaired. My dyslexia again is coming to it, so it's small difficulty there. But actually, for you, I'd say that text-to-speech software would be quite useful. And I think that again, using the concept of maybe a headset to help you, depending on your hearing ability, may help you a little bit more. I think that actually struggling with reading is definitely an issue. Maybe having software that can do it is hearing impairment. Thank you very much. Maybe having software that does synchronize highlighting with reading may help you a little bit more. I think that definitely that speech-to-text software is there, and that will actually be covered fully in our next webinar. So in our next webinar, we will talk about the products that are there, and again, we can bring that up. So the next question I've got there, you mentioned an organisation who supports, who works with dyslexics. Can you repeat the name? So I mentioned earlier about Dyslexia Aware Counselling, which is Groups, which is an organisation that helps train counsellors to support counselling. They also do dyslexia counselling, mainly for adults. And then you also have Spectacle Coaching, which is run by John Hicks, who also does the Study with Dyslexia blog. He does a little bit of coaching and counselling for students as well. Have you ever heard of support of coaches? Sorry, I think I might have answered this question. Have you ever supported from coaches? If yes, would it be? If yes, what was the most useful? Did they session with? So I've never had any support from coaches really. Only mainly. I wouldn't say life coaches, but maybe the concept of spiritual coaches in the sense of talking to say a friend who's a vicar, in that coaching concept of just being calm and relaxed. And I think that's the thing, is that the thinking about your mental well-being as well is also an issue, and I think that's also a difficult thing that we have to deal with when it comes to dyslexia. We have technology to help us, but also I think that actually we have to think of ourselves, and that's why I'm always about thinking about ourselves. It's a really useful concept. So, all right, I'm about to visit the DSA to get funding. As someone who is dyspraxic, what kind of technology, what type of technology would one should be request? So with your DSA, you should get that support, that needs assessor should know about dyspraxia and should know about it. I think the concept of speech to text could be very useful for you as a dyspraxic to help with that coordination difficulties. It may be you think about an ergonomic mouse, an ergonomic keyboard, maybe to get that posture right, just to help you a little bit more. That's more for physical but it can help some dyspraxics. I would say also time management and understanding how you can use technology to help you in time management. So a cloud-based email and calendar system like iCloud or Gmail or Outlook that you can put your calendar dates in, and that can sync between devices, that then allows you to actually maximize that kind of ability. And then looking at products built in, so we're not touching on note taking within the next few weeks, so to things like OneNote, Evernote, they're really good products that are out there that could be quite useful for you, just to keep them notes in one place. The floor is still open if you have questions. So at the moment there's no questions in the box, so I'm just waiting for questions. So while I do that, I'm just going to bring back to this slide here, just so you can see it. So you've got that. Okay. Another question. So thank you. Any overall structures Any overall structures of chapters? So that the person who's just sent me that message, thank you, and overall, can you give me a bit more information? I don't understand what you mean. Please do, if you have a question for me, do write it in. You will get an email from us with the recording in, but also but if you have a question that you need to ask, you can ask it there. We'll be notified of the future dates. So future dates are on the screen. What we're going to do is we will send out the links for the next one in hopefully this evening we will do, so you can then sign up to that. It will be a free webinar, of course, and then there'll be other links in there to find out more information. So the person who said the previous message said, sorry, how to structure work. I am trying to write a journal of articles. Is it hard mind mapping? It is hard. It is so hard mind mapping the concept. So mind mapping would be the best way forward. The mind mapping concept there is really good. The tool that I will talk about, it will be MindView and how I use it. And that, to me, you can really use that to build chapters. You can really use that actually to build a whole structure. So mind mapping is a really useful tool. So I think, yes, that actually that will be the way forward for you to actually help you build up that structure of journal entries and so forth. Other tools, it is there. So sorry, nearly said the person's name. The tool I said was MindView, but I will go into more details about that on the one on Tuesday, the 12th February, an introduction to mind mapping and the best best available options out there, from my personal opinion, of course. But I will talk about that on that Tuesday, the 12th. So do sign up to them. They are on the Dyslexia Box website. You can go to the Dyslexia Box website and you will find them on there. And I know that they will be reshared on social media as well. I think that actually for all of you that it is all about a starting point. I think it is a journey. So I'm just going to delete a few of these questions that I've answered, just so I know another one's coming and I don't want to miss it. I'll be able to read it. Okay. Is it difficult to know which tool suits? Is there anywhere that you can test the different options before you buy them? It's a very good question. Currently there isn't actually. Well, I say that, and there is and there isn't. So there is what they call some access centres around the country, which allow you, if you were in the university structure, to test out equipment. I think that if you had that conversation and you needed to try something out, there is a way of trying it. So some technology companies will allow you to do demos of products. You can download demos of software. You can get a demo of, say, like a C pen or a reading pen, just to help you just trial it out. I think that in the future that is something that actually is a really good option, I think, to actually go and look at equipment first. I think it's something that it's an interesting conversation to be had. And I think the thing about it is, it's that conversation, that needs assessment conversation. Depends on your environment and your knowledge. I think that events like the Bet Show is a really useful tool, which is next week. I think that would be that's a good way of looking at technology, not assistive technology as such, but as technology. I think that there will be. I think from that question my head is going at 30 miles an hour as a dyslexic. So it may be that we do hold an awareness day for anyone and everyone to come and look at technology and have a play around with technology, just because I think that's a useful tool to do. It's a concept that actually could move very much further forward with people. So it's something that we may do in the future to actually support with that kind of concept. So thank you very much for that.